So the session that's coming up now is session 2. The discussion will be on 74th Amendment and Karnataka cities. So hopefully I'll leave it to the chair to organize the session. Can we please call the panelists, Mr. Mathew Idiculla? Mathew? On the previous one? Yes, yes. For every session, we'll have question and answers. Mathew Idiculla, are you here? Mathew, please. Yeah. Sir Ashwin Mahesh, please. Dr. Anil Kumar. Yes, please. And Srimati Brinda Sastry. Hello. Dr. Kala, shall I leave this to you?
Yes.
Can you take over from me?
Yeah.
Thanks. You can do it sitting. You can.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, so thank you all for being with us so patiently. That was indeed a very, very thought-provoking and interesting morning inaugural session. So first of all, let me thank INHAF, Civic and Citizens Agenda for Bengaluru for inviting me and putting together this session, and very, very timely and appropriate on the occasion of the 76th Independence Day forthcoming, and asking for independence for our cities, SWARAJ for cities, right? So thanks a lot, Sandeep Anirudhan, and also my own dear friend and colleague, Katyayani, for inviting all of us again. So I had something prepared, but before I get to that, I think I need to respond to a couple of things that were raised in the inaugural session. First is the point about this Hind Swaraj book that's circulating. So I completely agree with what Kirti Shah said, that really cities are very, very important for us. And I would like to make one point here. I mean, we all know, I mean, I also appreciate what Professor Jeevan said about villages being the blood on which cities are built. But I should say that as all of you appreciate, there is a two-way interaction between villages and cities, and we cannot really look at them in isolation. And they have a lot of interactions, and cities and villages are both natural organisms, especially in the context of a democratic sovereign republic that we are looking at. We cannot really tell people don't come to Bengaluru, because that is the hope of their livelihood, that Bengaluru will improve their life someday, right? So I mean, we don't have a hukou system, which actually China is now reforming. We cannot say don't come to cities. There's a democracy. So that is the first reaction that I would like to make in response to the inaugural session. One. The second point I would like to make is about India's urbanization. India is supposed to be only 31% urban as of census 2011. However, I hope all of us appreciate that we have a very, very conservative or restrictive definition of what is urban, right? Population density of 400 persons per square kilometer, I mean 5,000 persons, and also 75% male main non-agricultural employment, right? So this is very, very conservative and very restrictive. And I find in some of my own research that if we were to relax this definition of urban, India would be actually more than 65% urban today. I mean, this is also borne out by the Economic Survey of India, ADB, based on their night lights data, and so forth, right? India is definitely more than 50% urban. That is one. Now, coming to Karnataka, our own Karnataka, right? So Karnataka is 38%, 38.67%, something like that, urban as of census 2011. However, based on the same research, I find Karnataka could be up to 55% urban as of 2011. If again, the restrictive definition of urbanization were to be relaxed a little bit, right? So we all need to be really worried. 50% of our cities live in village cities, population lives in cities. And there is, as I said, interaction between the cities and villages. And there is a substantial empirical evidence that remittances from the migrants to cities, they also go back and improve the impoverished villages. That a substantial proportion of consumption in villages actually come from the remittances from cities, from their family members, sons, daughters, or their relatives, right? So that is the other point I want to make. Now, one important feature of the urbanization in Karnataka, I want to make this point because I think nobody else has raised this issue before, is of urban primacy, right? Bangalore is a primate city, which means that Bangalore as of census 2011 was 8.45 times the size of the second biggest city, Mysuru, right? So that was as of census 2011. And based on estimated populations for 2021, I find that Bangalore's primacy has become even more severe, which means Bangalore has become actually 12 million, Mysore has become 1 million. So Bangalore is still about 10 times the size of Mysuru, right, in 2021. So we are talking about 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and decentralization here, but urban primacy implies a lot of centralization of power, right? Centralization. So that is one thing that I want to point out in the context of this 74th Constitutional Amendment Act debate. So now there are a few other things that I want to talk about in terms of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. So I think Dr. Ravindra talked about this, but I will try to highlight some slightly different aspects of this act, what they actually provide for in terms of our the governance of our cities. So one is the setting up of 3 types of municipalities. One is city corporations, city municipal councils, and town municipal councils, which I think Karnataka has done really well on. That is the first aspect of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. Second is the devolution of functions and adequate financial powers to municipalities. So that is something I think definitely the panelists will talk about. Adequate representation of women and weaker sections, which I hope the panelists will also talk about. Regular conduct of municipal elections, regular and fair conduct. That's what the provision says, fair conduct of municipal elections. And we know that our own Bengaluru has deferred a municipal elections for the past several years. So we don't really have a council, elected body. And the last part of the provision of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act is the constitution of grassroots level structures, governance structures, like ward committees, like what Dr. Ravindra said, district planning committees, metropolitan planning committees, and state finance commissions, SFCs, which basically recommend devolution of finances from the state to the local bodies. Okay. So how has Karnataka done on each of these aspects? One is that the state government, has transferred 17 out of 18 functions highlighted in the 74th CAA, right? 17 out of 18. But the only one which is not covered, anybody has any guesses except the panelists here? Anybody has any guesses which is the one function which is not transferred to ULBs in Karnataka as designated in the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act? Yes, fire services. That's absolutely right. That was no doubt from Katyayani herself. So out of these 17 functions, ULBs are solely responsible only for 3. right? These are slaughterhouses, stray cattle and animals, and burial grounds. These are hardly functional to the efficient functioning of a city, except the stray cattle and animals can be controlled better in order to relieve traffic congestion, right? So these are only three functions. Now, the cities have no role in two functions, which are really very, very important. Which are those? Urban planning and slum improvement, right? These are the urban poor and also urban planning, which the cities have important local knowledge of, right? State government in Bengaluru cannot really control what's happening in Chitradurga, Davangere. Like in Chitradurga, you know that how many children and how many people have died because of contamination of water, inadequate devolution of financial power and functional autonomy, right? So, and cities have limited role in 8 functions which have been transferred, right? These are land use, water supply, public health, right? The Chitradurga example that I just gave. And in respect of some other functions, they have just a very dual role, very, very limited role, right? This is the state of the transfer of functions. Now, I think I would like to touch upon one other aspect which the 74th CAA mandated, in the sense of regular and fair conduct of municipal elections. And the CAG, I looked up, found a Comptroller and Auditor General of India report on the status of implementation of the 74th CAA in Karnataka, and found that during 2018 to 20, elections were held in 192 ULBs. 192, correct? However, a council was formed only in 5 of the 192 ULBs. What happened in the case of the remaining 187 ULBs, where fair elections were held, fair elections, fair within quotes, because they're all in litigation. The litigants went to court with respect to the procedure followed in the conduct of elections, right? So that seems to be a major bone of contention here. Now, and also a CAG audit. I don't know if Dr. Ravindra mentioned this. I missed it, I thought. The CAG audit also found that except in Bengaluru, no other city has functioning ward committees. And even in Bangalore, he was referring to a lot of problems. So, the last point, not the least, I think it's one of the most important. Karnataka has lagged behind significantly than that of the other states in setting up state finance commissions. State finance commissions, until now, 6 state finance commissions must have been set up since the 74th CAA for adequate financial devolution to the urban local bodies. But in Karnataka, the recommendations of the fourth SFC were being implemented with effect from 2019 to 23, with a delay of 9 years, right? So no doubt, this delay has affected fund devolution to our ULBs significantly. So I don't want to cut into the time of the panelists here. They're all very distinguished. So I'm really curious to know from the panelists what they have to say on the implementation of the various functions, provisions of the 74th CAA. And please limit yourself to 5 minutes each. And then during the discussion, we will come back to each of you. So may I go ahead and invite the panelists in the same order in which they are listed in the program. So first, Mathew Idiculla, go ahead, 5 minutes, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Katyani, and thanks, Sandeep, for the invitation, and thanks, Kala, for the introduction. I think Chair has already given most of the answers to the question. I don't know what more the panels can add, but let me just take it at a broader level and ask a few questions and provoke some responses. We're running about 1 hour late, so I'll try to keep it around 5 minutes itself. Firstly, looking at the idea of Swaraj for cities and just going back to what Sandeep introduced, references to Hind Swaraj and how does Swaraj, the idea of Swaraj work in the context of cities. I think it is important for us to have a sense, have an understanding, if not a vision of what we mean by either Swaraj for cities or urban governance, the role of urban governance or urban government in India post 73rd, 74th. The question is, do we actually visualize our cities as city governments or urban governments or local governments, or are we back to using the terminology that, I mean, we are still using it, the idea of urban local bodies, right? So, I mean, I know that it sounds similar, but it makes a lot of difference. Did we create a government at the third level, or did we just create a body which can be either, dismissed or overtaken or administered from above by the state? So that's some clarity that we should have. If you look at the 74th, what it says versus what we use in state government documents. If you look at the 74th, there's no reference to anything called urban local bodies, right? This is the terminology is municipalities and 3 types, and the idea of local governance and institutions of self-government. But if you look at the way we have continued to frame state policies, are still haven't adapted to that change. So what is, at this stage, when we look at even questions of rethinking 74, we should actually look at, hey, beyond, of course, questions of rethinking, how have we visualized the role of cities and the role of local governance within our federal framework? Do we really see it as a third tier of government? Or do we actually see it as a body that can be dispensed with? I don't believe that necessarily, say, Article 1 has to be amended for that, but just the division of powers, say in the 7th schedule, now you have 3 lists, state, union, and concurrent. You don't have a local government list, right? So all of it suggests that we really haven't created a third tier of government, right? There is an intention to create something like a third tier in the 73rd and 74th, but not entirely. And obviously the states haven't gone ahead and done more than that. So that's one. Now, the second question is why this has happened. First is we need to have a sense of what we are talking about. Second question is if we are saying it's not happened, what are the reasons for it? Both legal, political, institutional reasons, legal and institutional reasons, as well as the political and social realities that cause this, right? So firstly, if you look at it, as everyone said, it's 30 years since the 73rd and 74th. What is the fundamental challenge that we see? I would say there are both inherent flaws in the way the 74th is designed, as well as problems in its interpretation and its implementation. So what are some, I don't want to get into all of it because, very little time, but there are inherent flaws. Just for example, the idea of devolution is on, if you at least read the phrase, it's the state may, and it's not that state shall devolve powers. And if you look at even the financial provisions, there is no independent domain of taxation which is given to local governments. Local governments can tax as long as it's as per the state laws, right? As what the state allows the local government to tax. So there are inherent limitations within the 74th Amendment itself. Just if you look at the 18 functions under the 12th schedule, you have things like cattle ponds and all, animal slaughterhouses and all mentioned, but you don't have transport, for example, as one of the functions that can be done by the local government, right? So there are inherent limitations within 74th. Then, of course, there are problems in the way courts and others have interpreted. I don't want to get into the details there because my understanding is the court has been quite conservative in understanding and interpreting the 74th and hasn't taken it to the next level. I'll leave it there. There are cases, I don't want to bore you with that. And thirdly, in terms of implementation, as that is, of course, that's been the focus area, which is why I didn't start with that. States have not implemented in multiple ways. They have passed legislations to comply with it in some ways, but haven't implemented in its spirit. There are many provisions. Kala has already referred to many of them. Now, what are the reasons for it? Very quickly, I don't want to get into all of the political economy reasons, but there is a clear understanding we can sense, especially given the difference between 73rd and 74th. We keep saying that 73rd seems to have done well versus 74th not as much. And the literature on this is not as well developed as, because it's not easy to identify causation, right, of why things don't happen, as opposed to understanding functional devolution, which is more straightforward. But if you look at it, it's simply, at least one key reason, it's simply because cities continue to be the economic resource base, the cash cows for the state government. If you let go of powers, unless you're mandated to, if you have the discretion to either continue to govern or continue to hold powers over it, or if you have, if you presently have it and you're asked to withdraw, but you have the discretion not to withdraw the powers over something, why would any state government want to say not control the land? Why would any state government not create, institutions that will override the city in its functioning? So given that, I do believe, of course, we can try to again amend the constitution. We can try many things, unless we, as a public, in the public sort of debates, there is an understanding, there is some sort of a movement, there is some sort of incentive structures that are built in for challenging the way the present system is framed, and have an actual political decision to change that structure, right? I don't see much movement or much change happening, because it's been 30 years. There have been, incremental changes here. There have been small victories around participation, around ward committees, but the institutional structure remains the same. And unless we actually look at it politically and have a clear decision to challenge that, I don't see that change much. So yeah, I'll just stop there. I'll get back to specifics at a later point. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mathew, because you're exactly on the dot. You ran over by 4 minutes, but I think that the government officials are not here. None of them are here. Okay, so that gives us 7 to 9 minutes per panelist, and you exactly took 9 minutes, Mathew. Thanks a lot for those observations. And now may I call upon Ashwin Mahesh to give his remarks about the 74th CAA in Karnataka. Thank you.
Thank you, Kala. Is this on? Okay. And I want to sort of take this in a different direction. We have events like this several times a year in the city. I've been to dozens over the years, and these are important. The particular aspects of failure of the 74th Amendment and its implementation get discussed in considerable detail. The points list keeps getting developed and perhaps enlarged from time to time. The answer to your question partly is that there is a Madhya Pradesh High Court ruling that state administration is only an administrative thing and not that. But there's also, on the courts, I would have said, there is one other matter that is worth looking at. The Supreme Court declared last year in the summer that local elections are not an administrative convenience of the state government, and that they have to be held in a timely way. And if there are changes that the state government proposes to make, they have to make them in time for the elections to be held subsequently. But the Supreme Court generally doesn't back itself up, forget about backing the people. Having said something like that, Mumbai doesn't have elections, Bangalore doesn't have elections, Delhi didn't have elections, all of that since the ruling of the Supreme Court, and the courts did nothing about it. By and large, courts are not really backing themselves, forget about backing the citizens. Police reforms were passed as directives from the court in 2005. They've still not been implemented. 74th Amendment is 32 years old. It's still not being implemented. There's a lot of things that you can actually not implement as a state government, and the courts usually will allow the state government to continue not implementing them. The government will go there and say, oh, there's some reason. The court will say next hearing will be in some 17 days or 17 months, or whichever it is. It makes no particular difference. By and large, that ball is not where the answer is. For all of us, I think there is a different question, and highlighted by you're asking, is anyone from the government here? Why isn't anyone from the government here? It's a reasonable question. Why isn't anyone from the government here? And I think we all know the answer. It's just that we haven't sort of gone to the second order question. The answer is fairly simple. They don't give a shit about us. Right? They really don't think that it matters what people believe about these technical things in the law, their lack of implementation, or any of these kinds of things. That puts the question actually back to us. We've sort of gone through too many of these discussions asking, how can we put the question to the government? How can we put the onus on people who are supposed to do what they're supposed to do? But someone also, Idiculla, you also said, why would anybody give up the power that they already have? Right? Why would anybody give up the power that they already have? So the question is actually back to us. If the government is not going to do what the 74th Amendment says it is going to do, and if the government is not going to do what even the Supreme Court of India says it should do, what will you do? That's really the question. If there is an analogy to be made to Mahatma Gandhi, I would say he was in a political battle within which he might have laid out some technical points that you agreed or disagreed with, but he was fundamentally in a political battle. We can't ignore the political battle. If the government will not do what you want it to do, what will you do? That's the real question here. And if we say that the answer to that is that we will continue to press forward in a technical way, the government is very happy for you to do that, right? It knows that every time that it gives you a biology exam, you're writing answers about chemistry, you continue to fail, they're quite happy with that. In some ways, we have to first recognize that this is a political problem, and not a political problem also. Too often what happens is that when we say it's a political problem, we say, okay, well, given that it's a political problem, let's look at all the technical things also. It is not a technical problem also. It is only a political problem. The technical problems are actually not, they would not continue to be problems in this way if you address the political problem, first of all. So it's a mistake to think of it as an also type of problem. You have to say it's fundamentally only a political problem. So if something is a political problem, what is the appropriate response in a democracy? You change the political leadership. You change the people who represent you. Now, there's a second order problem in that. The public is convinced that no matter who they elect, it will be the same. That's actually not true. That's actually not true, but the public is convinced of it anyway. You can elect people who will do things differently, but by and large, the public doesn't believe that. Now, this has its own challenges, because in a sense, you have a political problem in which the public is called upon to do something politically, which the public itself believes was not going to work. That's the paradox that we're trapped in. That today, that's the paradox that we're all trapped in. That if you don't find the way out of this, I don't want to call it a chakravyuh, because then it concedes that there isn't a way out of it. But if you don't find the way out of this, there is actually nothing else that's going to. The governments, the state governments would be very happy to continue as things are for the next 30 years also. Perhaps you can get the courts to do A or B or C on some rulings. You have to be really fortunate for that. I mean, look at the examples of the Metropolitan Planning Committee, which are so violative of the 74th Amendment's directives that it's not even a joke. We created a body, it doesn't have members, it doesn't have budgets, it doesn't have a functioning secretariat, doesn't have anything. And the State Finance Committee, speaking of the State Finance Commission, the last time when the State Finance Commission was going through its work, I was one of the people called to give evidence before the State Finance Commission. And I asked a question to which I never got an answer. The State Finance Commission says that it appropriates money between the state government and the local bodies. As far as anybody can tell, the Metropolitan Planning Committee is between the state government and the local bodies. It is clearly not superior to the state government. It is clearly not inferior to the local bodies. How is it possible that you say that my jurisdiction extends from A to C without touching B? Why don't you allocate money to the Metropolitan Planning Committees? And the answer from the Finance Commission was, well, the government hasn't properly set it up and staffed it anyway. I said, your job is to allocate the money. If you allocate the money, perhaps they would staff and set it up properly because they'll follow the money anyway, right? So in a sense, it is very easy to go from one department to another, one organization to another in the current setup, and keep identifying technical challenges or technical errors and technical shortcomings in each of their functioning. But that is not the problem at all. All of those things are a distraction from the problem. The fundamental truth is it is now purely a political problem. That if you do not engage it as a political problem, then there's no other game. Now you can spend, now I would actually appreciate a different conversation on what does it mean to engage it as a political problem. But I feel to engage it as a technical problem is to play into the hands of the people who want you to remain in that conversation only. And that's by and large something that at least in the last few years I've said I'm not going to do that, right? Which is why, like in most forums nowadays, I just say this is the only point that I make again and again. This is not a technical problem. The bus can be made to run properly. The metro can be made to run properly. The footpaths can be improved. All of these things that you think cannot be improved can be improved. And in a small way, these civic problems in my own neighborhood, I don't even face them anymore because these things have been more or less sorted. And it's sortable. But what cannot be sorted is all these questions that are purely in the political space. And it is important for people who are particularly engaged with the details of the problem to begin to ask the question, what if we stop behaving technically and start thinking of this politically?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwin Mahesh, for that very thought-provoking, provocative insight. Thank you. You exactly remained within the 9 minutes that you had. Now, may I call upon Professor Anil Kumar to give his comments on this? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kala. It's an honor and a privilege for me to speak on this stage along with so many dignitaries and amidst such an august gathering. It's working.
It should be in green. Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible. Now, I just want to say a few things about 74th Amendment. And more than that, going beyond that, I want to say a few more things. The first point I would like to say about 74th Amendment and its implementation. And its implementation is that we're only talking of metropolitan cities. Since morning, the discourse has been only on the metropolitan city of Bangalore. But Karnataka also consists of many district cities where not only 74th Amendment, but the very governance of cities is a problem. And this problem is a governance problem and a planning problem. Long time ago, I have toured many district cities of Karnataka, Kolar, Davangere, Bellary, Bidar, many other cities I have been to. And there have been governance of these cities has been in bad shape. And this is an understatement. It is because the 74th Amendment is not followed, as many have said, in their spirit and letter. That's one. The second point I would like to say is also that the governance of these district cities has been largely in terms of commissioner model, district commissioner led bureaucratic governance. The role of elected councillors in the governance of the district cities has been much less, and their powers of decision making on the city governance and service delivery has been very less. So unlike what you're saying, what all you're saying, that Bangalore has not received attention, Bangalore is in bad shape, Bangalore is having traffic congestion, no footpaths, no bus shelters, etc., 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 etc. That problems that you are complaining about Bangalore, in spite of that, I would like to say that Bangalore has been receiving sufficient attention when compared to many other cities in Karnataka, which receive very little attention in the media, in the academia, and in the intellectual and circles and among the intelligentsia. Therefore, I would like to highlight this problem to you, that please do not misunderstand urban question as only a metropolitan question. It is larger than that. And an added reason to it is that there are so many small towns, statutory towns and census towns that have been emerging of late because of the urbanization process, which have not sufficient administrative mechanisms. They are neither cities nor villages. They have been evolving from villages or big villages to cities, and the administrative mechanisms have not been sufficient to take them in, or provide them proper governance and service delivery. So the urban question, as we see today, is far larger, and it covers not only metropolitan cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, and Calcutta, and Chennai. It covers a whole lot of district and taluk cities and cities below them. So the 74th Amendment is supposed not only to cover the metropolitan governance, it is also supposed to cover the entire gamut of urban governance in the country. If it is a failure in a metropolitan context, it is far worse a failure in district and sub-district levels. Please understand this. The district and sub-district level cities, which are numerous in the country and which are growing very fast, suffer from lack of funds, finances, and functionaries to govern them. And I'm highlighting this problem because often in urban discussions, it is only the metropolises that retain attention and not the other cities. Now, I understand, I come to the metropolitan city problem next. Why is that it is so difficult to govern a metropolitan city? The point is this, that metropolitan cities like Bangalore, which are wonderful and great cities, I don't want to gainsay all that is there to Bangalore because its governance is bad. Bangalore is a great city, it's a great IT capital, and its urbanization has been very fast. But the point, however, is that like all metropolitan cities, the city of Bangalore too is integrated into the circuits of capital. I mean to say capital accumulation. Therefore, it cannot be governed so simply by city governance and political models alone. The governance will cater to the needs of the capital. So what happens is that those areas, sections, those sectors which need attention will receive attention, and those sectors, those sections of people, those areas which are not conducive to capital will not receive attention. And also the city governance has received problems of bureaucratic governance and less popular governance. So that's another reason. But on the whole, I would like to say that the city of Bangalore, like other metropolitan cities, has been receiving sufficient attention than say, for example, to tell you, to dramatize the Kalyana Karnataka region or its cities. Let me say it emphatically. The cities of Kalyana Karnataka receive far less attention, Bijapur, Gulbarga, Bidar, and so on, than Bangalore. So let's not complain too much about Bangalore's situation. It has been receiving some attention, if not entire attention. Sometimes entire attention too is going to Bangalore. Second, I want to come to the point of Swaraj to the cities. Now, I want to question this concept of Swaraj. Yes, Swaraj is a concept given by Gandhi for rural areas to become self-sufficient, independent republics. Today, if we call Swaraj for cities, do we mean that cities are going to be independent city-states? What do you mean by Swaraj for cities? Are they going to secede? There's a question I'm asking out. Again, it's common sense. Again, it's Gandhian common sense even. What do you mean by Swaraj for cities? Is Bangalore going to secede from rest of the Karnataka? Is it going to become a city-state? It's part of Karnataka. It's part of India. So let's rethink this concept. Swaraj for cities means internal democracy, internal self-determination for the governance of the city. To that extent, it's fine. But today, the metropolitan cities have developed their own culture, their own politics, their own intellect, so much so that they're completely separate from the rest of the country. And that shouldn't happen. So I'm questioning Swaraj for cities. Cities cannot secede from their hinterlands. They're part of the country. And in this context, I come to the last but one point, that is role of society and civil society in the implementation of the 74th Amendment. I tell you, the role of civil society has been seen in two terms: either work in synergy with the state or work in conflict with the state, or both, in synergy with the state and at the same time questioning the state. These have been the three stances left for the civil society. Now, I am saying that in the present conditions, if we really need Swaraj for cities, and not only city of Bangalore, but for all cities, the idea of synergy with the government is over. Now, what is remaining is only contestation with the government. Synergy with the government has come to be basically being co-opted by the government or being dominated by the bureaucracy over the civil society. And as Ashwin has said, what is the answer for political questions? Is political movements and political mobilization. Yeah, and coming to last point, that the last point that I want to come to before I once again thank Ms. Katyayani Chamraj, Professor Ashwin Kumar, Professor Kala, and everyone, is that I think we need to rethink the 74th Amendment as it can be applied to all the cities. And the final question is democracy versus capital. It is not true that cities are only surviving on the blood of the villages. Cities are today integrated into the international circuits of capital. And therefore, it's a question of democracy versus capital. And therefore, what is that I'm trying to say is that we need more and more social mobilization, social movements, even urban social movements, to reclaim local governance from the clutches of capital. I hope I've made my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Anil, for that very distinct view, as opposed to that of the previous panelists asking about metropolitan governance versus subaltern governance, right? We will come back to this later in the discussion. You ran over your time by a few minutes, but that's fine. We can accommodate it because there's no one here from the government, and we save 15 minutes from that. And now I invite Srimati Brinda Sastry to make your remarks. You can take up to, 10 minutes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Kala. So having heard all of the other panelists, what I would like to focus on a little bit is on the urban planning agenda and its relationship with the 74th Constitutional Amendment. As we know, there is this whole focus on democratic decentralization of urban planning, and this itself poses a lot of challenges for us today. If we examine the way planning is getting implemented or done in our cities today, be it the metropolitan city or even the smaller local cities, we know that the master plan is the key planning tool that is being adopted. And the master plan as a process, the plan making process has various steps that is typically followed. Starting from, the basics of gathering data through surveys, preparing existing conditions, mapping, documentation, and then identifying various issues, problems in the city, taking each sector, doing a sectoral analysis, like be it transport, housing, any of the other land use, other sectors, and then creating this document, which will actually bring out larger strategies as a framework for how planning and the growth of the city can take place for the future. So there are these modeling exercises that are done that will identify what how much growth the city can take, how development can happen, where it can happen, and the distribution of this spatially across the city is part of the exercise. So the question to ask here is that what is the interface between planning and the citizens and the people? And how do people kind of get themselves involved in this process? And since the 74th Amendment talks about democratic decentralization in planning, it is an important question to ask as to what platforms are available for citizens to engage in this planning process, and in what capacity can they participate, as well as how effective is this participation in the plan making exercise as such. There has been also discussions earlier on the planning having to be an effort that integrates across the region, the rural-urban interface, and how the city's urban plan needs to be embedded within the framework of either the metropolitan city in terms of a regional plan, or even at a district level, the district plan. So these are issues that are to be considered while the planning exercise has to happens, basically. And in the typical planning process, since all of these things are like as an exercise, as a part of the process of making the plan, there are different steps where the citizens can possibly participate and become entities that are contributing towards the development of the plan. However, if you look at the KTCP Act and the typical manner in which the plans are being processed and being prepared, there is a limitation in how much the citizen, the local people can actually contribute and become part of the process. Typically, the plan making process has to be first identified and announced to the public. And once the draft plan gets prepared, it is put out for public suggestions for about 60 days. And this is the limited manner in which the people can actually get involved in the process. With the devolution of powers, as the 74th Amendment says in letter, there is a possibility for people to kind of get involved in the process. And I think most planning agencies, or rather people rather, and planners as experts, look at and pin hopes on the 74th Amendment, saying, yes, it has been devolved, and we have an opportunity to kind of bring this planning out to the people and say people can get involved in this process. However, we all know that that is something that is not necessarily happening. And there are these huge challenges where we are trying to effectively bridge the gap between the infrastructure development and the public's demands for how the city should grow and be. The 74th Amendment provides this framework for creating the MPCs and the DPCs, as well as the Karnataka Municipal Corporations Act has actually enacted the 74th Amendment by envisaging the creation of the ward committees. Now, the intention is to institutionalize the citizen participation in municipality functions through these ward committees. However, again, we know that there are some limitations in the manner in which these ward committees are functioning. And the typical intent of creating this interface where people can actually become part of the process, normally the way it is working is that the plan in terms of the plan itself, the draft plan is being put out to the public, and they are being asked for suggestions as a reaction. But there is no integration for people to become part of the decision-making process. So we need to kind of find a way, and the question to ask here is that, are there structures in place that would actually allow the people to become part of this process? And particularly at the ward committee level, what structures can we put in place for this to happen, for a true participatory process to happen, where people are getting involved right from the beginning of the plan making process in terms of even data collection. I think we have examples of cities, Delhi, Mumbai, who have actually created the existing conditions plans and put it out for the public to actually comment, correct any errors, and kind of, become part of that process of even bringing the data into the planning process. So we need to kind of see, while there is hope that, this structure can help us, we need to find a method. We need to find processes where the planning can be actually done in a manner where people become part of this process. So people need to be part of the process in terms of where scenarios are getting developed, and the trade-offs among the scenarios in terms of development of the city are actually explained. There is a deliberative kind of moderated discussions on these, and people are aware of what are the pros and cons of some of these situations so that informed decisions can be made. And there are, of course, there have to be opportunities where there are lots of negotiations that are put out on the table, and it's very difficult to build consensus, but some sort of a agreement on what should the future of this plan be, or the future of the cities be. So the nature of this participatory governance and the idea of deepening the democracy through the 74th Amendment is on one hand an opportunity, but there are several questions that need to be raised about how people are engaging themselves. And we know that in effect, it is mostly the middle class and the elite who have become part of this decision-making. And there are like a lot of processes, even our smart city mission projects, as well as the JNNURM Amrut city projects are becoming, they all have the participatory mandate, but they are becoming tokenistic as such, and not necessarily being integrated within the planning process. So the questions to ask is that, are there structures again that will support this kind of a deliberative participatory process, and where people get more informed through a moderated discussion. And when we have a diverse set of people where there are like polarized opinions, polarized kind of agendas across groups, and there are lots of conflicts that are going to arise, are there structures that will help this kind of a process? And especially when we have the unorganized sectors, the informal aspects that are there in the cities, people who are working informally and who are somewhat invisible in the city, how are they going to become part of this process is another question to ask. So we all know that the ward committees don't meet regularly. We also know that when they meet, they tend to become like places where people go to give their complaints, because right now particularly in a city like Bangalore, we don't have the corporators functioning right now. So people seem to be thinking that the ward committees will give their answers. So the engagement that is happening at the ward committee level is not necessarily something that people are using it to create plans. Or to participate in the plan creation at a local level. The idea of creating a local area plan is something that is so crucial to the planning process, because that brings the entire effort from ground up that would become part of the plan itself. And typically right now, the planning process is pretty much top down. So integrating across scales, right from the regional to the local level at the ward level, and preparing micro level plans at the ward level is a very crucial component of the planning process. And the devolution of the powers should ideally, in letter it does, but in spirit should be part of this. Should give the opportunity for people to actually become part of the process. But then there are also these other issues of when we say how to include everybody in the process. We need to make sure that there are geographic equitable systems, social inclusive methodologies that are put in place that will include everyone in the process, and not just the people who have the loudest voice or who are savvy enough to kind of attend and understand some of these things. Then we also need to kind of see how we can back the ward committee efforts through budgetary, institutional, as well as political support. The political support, which Ashwin mentioned, is really critical, because that's where there are drawbacks in the manner in which the plans and the planning efforts take place. We also need to look for emerging models of engagement where we build coalitions at the local level so that these local area plans become implementable eventually. And, coalitions with like professional groups, institutions, other civil society groups, marginalized groups, that will actually build a consensus across some of the issues that the cities face in terms of planning. So it is only then that we can actually come up with some sort of measurable outcomes that will solve some of the issues that the cities are facing, meet the goals of the vision that the city has for its in terms of its master planning process, as well as the larger agendas that were spoken about this morning in terms of the climate change, sustainable development goals, and all of that. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Brinda, for that overview of the planning process and what possibly can be done to bridge the gap between the government and the citizens in order to meet the expectations, or rather demand for public services, right, which are increasing now. So I don't know how much more time we have, Katyayani. So may I open this up to the audience? The audience has been very, very patient since morning, just listening to the panelists and the chairpersons and the keynotes. Should I open this up to see if there are any questions? Anybody who has a question, please identify yourself, use a mic, and please ask your question, and please be pointed and brief. Over to you, sir. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please come. Yeah. I mean, they can either use this mic or
Here.
anybody who wants to ask from there also is fine. This also okay, no problem.
Here, here.
Please identify yourself, sir, and then, yeah. Right, please go ahead.
Into social service activities, as well as I'm an activist for common man rights. And I have come up in the life of solving issues, solutions. So even here, I'm not going to put any questions to the panelists or anybody. Whatever they have raised, I want to give some solutions for that. Sir, this one will be always brief. Don't worry. Actually, first is only for your this one small point. You have not given the details of the book. You could have made the books available, SWARAJ. A few copies, it will be okay. Right. Now, coming to the one more speaker, he was telling there is no funds. But actually in government, there is no dearth of funds. Reason is the government money is getting into the pockets of the government officials. Because at the government level, we don't have selfless service oriented people. Whereas here, all those who have assembled, those who are viewing this meeting and everything, is there anyone who has contested the election here? No. Why? Because the systems are different.
Sir, you have to be please brief, because we have to give a chance to everyone, and I have to have the role of summarizing and ending the session on time. So thanks for your cooperation.
No, your interruption itself is taking the time.
No. Yeah,
Just
go
leave
ahead.
it.
But I'm being told by the organizers that your
For
questions
your
have to be
information, I'm
pointed.
very short and brief. This one itself is like that. So the reason is the election system has to be changed, which actually right in 98 itself, I've suggested President of India regarding some election issues. So here also, now I want the election system to be changed. When once that system changes, automatically we'll have a better people on the government. So a small, some brief, why nobody of us are contesting? It is a couple of reasons.
Sir,
We don't have.
sir, sorry to bother you. The thing is, you are invited to ask questions of the panel. Do you have a question for the panel?
Sir, whatever they have
If you
raised the
don't-
questions, I'm giving.
No. Do you have a question for the panel? Because we've asked the public to ask questions. If you don't have a question, please sit down.
Right.
If you have a question, please ask it quickly in one line. Can you please do that?
No. I said I'm just giving some solutions for the.
No, we have not
questions.
asked you for solutions right now.
Okay,
We'll ask you
Done.
for solutions later, but right now, do you have a question of the panel?
right.
Yeah, sorry. Apologize that.
No apologies. You are on.
Thank you. We'll actually invite you to a panel discussion and then you can give your views. Okay, sir.
So any other pointed questions from panel? Yes, the gentleman there. Do you want to give them the mic?
Yeah. Mike, is that?
They have a mic over there? Uh-huh.
Your voice is very loud.
I want to know the idea of this panel regarding the State Finance Commission. As someone rightly said, this should have been the 6th Finance Commission in Karnataka, whereas it is now only the 4th whose report we are trying to.
Sir, could you please repeat the question because it's going online also.
Okay. My question is regarding the State Finance Commission, because as we understand in Karnataka, the State Finance Commissions have not been formed as per the 74th Amendment Act. It should have been the 6th Finance Commission, but we now only have the 4th Finance Commission. That is all. One. And secondly, how these, as I have understood from the reports of the previous finance commissions, they are only touching upon the devolution of funds from the state government to the panchayat in a slightly methodical way. But whereas the devolution of funds from the state government to the municipal corporations is concerned, they are very vague and it is not helping the municipal authorities at all. So what is the suggestion of this panel regarding the State Finance Commission working?
Thank you, sir. Can we gather a few more questions and then I will respond and also ask my panelists to respond?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
My name is Umesh Babu. I'm Vice President, Bangalore City Aam Aadmi Party. My question is pointed to Dr. Anil, who just said Swaraj in the cities or Swaraj for the cities will make them isolated or completely separate units from the state government. Is your opinion same as the one which is happening in the National Capital Territory of Delhi also in the current scenario that the central government is like maybe wary of the consequences which is happening in Delhi, and Delhi might be a separate unit or so?
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
My name is Mr. Saranappa Barsi from Sadhana Social Development Organization in Karnataka. We are also working in Bangalore urban slum area. My question is, Dr. Brinda Madam, so how the 24th Amendment attract the vulnerable groups, like in urban slum area, we are facing transgender group and migration group and widows and also disabled groups. They are vulnerable groups. How the rehabilitation and how the livelihood opportunities take up to the body, municipal body or BBMP. How you said it is attract to the SDG also. Sustainable Development Goals, how attract the 74th Amendments? Please explain in detail. This is my question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Any other questions? Quick questions pointed to
My question is to
panelists.
Professor Brinda. You had mentioned in your talk about ward. Please tell me what are the functions of ward committees? How long the ward committees have been functioning previously, many years ago? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, please. I think there's a mic coming to you, ma'am.
Mr. Ashwin Mahesh had said that we are looking at everything from a technical point of view, and we need to progress to a political sort of viewpoint. But how does he see that? What in terms of social movements or in terms of political parties or in terms of getting elected, the local body, as Mr. Mathew had said, that you need to look at it now as local government. Don't look at it as local bodies. I think that's very important. So we need to change our mindset and we need to go about it in a political sense, as Mr. Mahesh had said. But how do we go about that? Who do we get together? Elected representatives of local bodies would be, local government would be the most, appropriate. So you need to connect with those people who are, there are thousands of them in all the local governments in Karnataka. They all need to come together with the academics who are sitting here, and you need to send your ideas to them. And, it has to be a whole movement for it to turn political and to turn government.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, one other hand there.
There's one question from online, from the Zoom. Our program is being broadcast on Zoom. As we
Yeah.
speak. So there's one attendee who's asking, are there any specific legislations in place to ensure regularity of holding elections for ULBs? More importantly, ensuring council assumes charge within a specified time period after the EC announces results, because many ULBs in North Karnataka region still lack council for years, even after ULB election results are declared. So that's pertinent.
Thank you. One more question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shreyas. I'm a first-year student of IRP Studies and Public Policy from St. Joseph's University. Ma'am, my question is open to either of the panelists. So in the year 2022, I believe at the end of the last year, the BBMP extended the 5-year contract of waste collection from door-to-door waste collection from every taluk in Bangalore. However, the locality that I live in, I see that it is not happening. Whereas when I, cycle 3 kilometers towards my university, I see that happening. So do you have any idea why such a discrepancy exists within such a small radius, and what we as residents of a particular locality can do to improve the situation?
Thank you. Yeah. The last one, please. Then I will ask the panelists to respond and summarize.
The question is
Please
regarding
be
the,
brief, sir.
regarding the planning process. You said the participation of the people in the planning process itself is a little bit difficult. Can we introduce one step behind the first planning process of data collection and presenting a fait accompli to the public? Instead of that, can we have a vision document to be prepared by the citizens, and the subsequent actions like preparation of plan, implementation, all that should be within the framework of this vision document of the citizens, so that the citizens get a better chance and opportunity to be the people who generate this plan actually.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So now, may I request the panelists to respond in reverse order of the way in which they gave their original comments. So Dr. Brinda, there are a lot of questions for you. So please go ahead first. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so there was 3 questions as I see. The first one had to do with the slum areas and how the 74th amendment actually includes vulnerable groups, and then what is its connection to, since I mentioned that there is a possibility that if we have measurable outcomes which are kind of inclusive in its process, sorry, the other way around. Since if we have an inclusive process, we will probably end up with much more measurable outcomes which are driven by the vision as well as the sustainable development goals. Okay, so the 74th amendment does not actually give you a direct kind of relationship between how vulnerable groups may be included in this planning process. It is up to the master planning process to create an environment where these groups can become part of the decision making and contribute within that whole process. And there are possibilities. I think a lot of master plans have actually tried to, especially in the metro cities across the nation, tried to kind of include such groups within by identifying them. So there are identification of slums. We all know that there are some notified slums and some that are not notified, but diligently, I think in the documentation process itself, there are methods in which they are identified and the people who live there are actually becoming part of the process. For example, in Pune, there is this effort that was done where the slum dwellers themselves documented their whole slum area. So in that sense, it is something that needs to be included, and it is not there as far as the 74th Amendment is concerned. The planning process needs to take cognizance of it. The other aspect about the ward committee functions, I'll just be brief. I mean, the ward committees typically meets once a month, and they are supposed to have give people the opportunity to participate in preparation of development schemes and also kind of address certain grievances. So if that is taken into consideration, then there are like opportunities for people to actually participate at that level. The third question had to do with the vision document. Yes, typically a process where we engage, it's not just for putting out the existing conditions, but every step of the process at every stage of preparation, there is in cities across the world, there are like, especially in the Western world, there are opportunities where people are actually brought into the process at every stage, and we can do it. I think even in Mumbai and Delhi, there are several efforts that are being done where people are brought into the visioning process itself. So it's an iterative process. It is something that that requires a lot of time because you have to go back and forth. And definitely bringing it out to the public makes a big difference in the quality of the product itself. Because we have to see planning as not just a technocratic approach where we are, crunching numbers and bringing out models, but we're also actually bringing in the people's opinions into this process, and without losing sight of certain development goals that are there, because cities have to have that, as well as sustainable kind of features, things that are equitable, sustainable, inclusive, and all of those other agendas that we always talk about in terms of, getting the development done. So yes, at every step of the way, it is required. And our DPRs that are creating these for, master plans and other planning processes, even JNNURM, smart cities, others, they don't seem to have proper allocation of funds as well as time for doing this kind of a process. So some sort of change has to happen at that scale to be able to for the planners and the government to actually include this in the process.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brinda. Professor Anil, do you want to go ahead? I think you had one question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I do not address myself to the Delhi situation because Delhi is particularly a specific case, which is a national capital, which is very different from the rest of the cities. It's an administrative capital, political capital, and national capital, and therefore it is very different. Delhi is an exception. The second point is, the related point is that when I say that the cities are Swaraj for cities can mean secession of the cities is because it is these cities which are becoming increasingly secluded in terms of their economies, their culture, their politics from rest of the society. Please note this point, because most of the time capital and culture industries concentrate in the big cities. The industries themselves concentrate in the big cities. And all other aspects revolve around the capital where it surrounds, where it accumulates. Therefore, the additional point is this, that the neglect of district cities, neglect of, whether it's Kalyan Karnataka or North Karnataka, whatever cities they are, happens because capital doesn't go there. And therefore, the other industries do not go there, the health, education, and so on. So the entire attention is in the mega cities. And if you are talking of these mega cities becoming or claiming Swaraj, I'm just problematizing the question. Do we mean to say that the mega cities are going to secede from the rest of the country? This has nothing to do with Delhi situation or the problems that the city of Delhi and administration of Delhi is currently facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anil. Dr. Ashwin, do you want to go ahead? And I think there was just one question for you.
In a sense, look, the terms of reference are set by the government at the time of constituting the Finance Commission. I would say that may be useful to have another set of what terms of reference emanating more directly than set by the government. Because what is set by the government is going to align with their preference for how that money is going to be distributed. So just like any other body, the SFC should also be quote unquote evaluated by people directly, so not only by academics and people who are planners, but by ordinary people too. And in this, I actually make a distinction between society and civil society. Too much of what we do conflates the two as though they were the same society. And as Anil sir pointed out, so civil society is quite happy to stand next to the government. And that's actually part of the problem, because civil society stands next to the government says that by engaging with civil society, I have engaged with society. And that is actually used to deflect it. So I would make an appeal to many of you who routinely engage the government wearing your civil society hats. Don't do that. Don't stand next to the government and let them equate their engagement with you as engagement of society itself. There was the question that, Madam, you asked about how does one behave politically in a space that is political to begin with. I think my experience has been, that politicians will take anybody who seriously if that person tries to influence the electoral outcome. I mean, let's just reduce it to that. If you are trying to influence the electoral outcome, then there's a reason why they should take you seriously, because almost all of that, their power flows from influencing the electoral outcome. And what do I mean by influencing electoral outcome? One, it's too simplistic to say, I will vote, encouraging everybody to vote. That's not what I mean. I would say that on election day, there must be at least 100 other people that you are encouraging to vote for a specific person that you have identified. Then you are behaving politically. If you're not doing that, then you're simply operating in a techno-managerial realm or in a citizenship realm, which is not going to change the political calculus. And this is not very difficult. Today, in every election, and this is true, I know this from experience, I've contested elections twice. Somebody asked if anybody has contested elections. And both times I got reasonable numbers of votes too. I was quite happy about that. Today, in every election at the local, state, and national level, there are candidates who would back the kinds of things that we are talking about today. We need to simply say that given that there are such candidates, we need to vote for them. To get into this paradigm of saying that that makes me political, and if I behave politically, then governments will not want to sort of quote unquote talk with me. My experience has been that the more political you are, the more government will listen to you, not the opposite. Most people in civil society believe the opposite, that if they behave politically, then governments will not listen to them. But actually the opposite. Everybody who is influential is political. Think of it like that. The guy that you despise for his politics today, he's influential. And the reason he's influential is that he's political. Once we internalize that and say, okay, let's do the things that he does, but not for the goals that he does.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwin. Dr. Mathew, Mr. Mathew, please be very brief because there were no questions.
Sure. No. So one was by the madam on, Ashwin has already more or less responded to, but just to add in, I do think the way to go is to, bring this question in the, just more or less agreeing with Ashwin here, to bring it in the mainstream political, debate and have, bring these as part of actual, electoral campaigns and all of that, and not, take it away from the technical side. There were a couple of questions on whether there are legal provisions on elections and on legal provisions on participation. So, firstly, on elections, actually there are, there is a constitutional basis to conduct, elections within time or have it within 6 months. There's a constitutional protection, but it's been, it's not been followed. Multiple cases, multiple reasons for it. But very simply, I would say that the SEC's functioning has not been as independent like the EC's functioning. And in terms of even delimitation of wards and reservation is often controlled by the state government and not the State Election Commission, which allows these delays to happen. And so despite some legal protection, it's not far enough. On the legal side about ward committees, actually the provisions for ward committees do not indicate any real participatory forum, at least in most of the laws, meaning ward committees are not envisioned as anyone can come and participate. It's not there in the laws. It just says people who are elected and who are part of the ward committees, debate. There is no clear, legal provision which allows anyone to participate. People do that. It's all through discretion, and in Bangalore's case, they've held these meetings and allowed people to come, but through whatever the benevolence of the state, and not through any clear legal requirement. So there is a big challenge there also. Yeah, that's.
Add one sentence to that.
Yeah, briefly, please.
Yeah, very. That having said that, despite what Mathew just now said, if you walk into your ward office and have something to say, they'll listen to you. It's got nothing to do with what's written down. They are not following what's written down anyway. So it's not got to do with what's written down, that you just need to behave in a way that says, I will not accept my marginalization.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwin. Let me just quickly take a few minutes to wind up, summarize and answer some questions which have not been answered by any panelists. I'll just go in random order. I'm not going to touch everybody or every question. I completely agree with the gentleman who came on stage and said that there's no dearth of government funds, right? The smart city mission, it gives 100 crores to every city, 1,000 crores actually, but the cities don't want to be tagged as smart cities. They say that, madam, you please leave us out. And then because there is a string, there's a matching condition that the city has to raise at least 10% of the matching grant they get, which they are not able to generate, right? So that is really the issue here. So no city wants to be tagged as a smart city because of that problem. And the SFCs, I completely agree with you. Karnataka has fallen behind many other states, but there might be serendipitous, a lot of reasons for Karnataka not to set up the SFCs. I think they were moving slowly. And then the COVID came, and one part of the SFCs is that they commission studies to institutions like us, academic institutions and research think tanks. And if they are not able to complete the field work on time due to exigencies like this, the term of the SFC keeps getting postponed. Maybe that is probably one reason, but we have completed all our studies on time given to us by the SFC. That is one thing that I wanted to say. And on the SWARAJ for Cities Delhi case, I think it came to Professor Anil, but I'll take the liberty of responding to it. I really sympathize with Delhi. Delhi would have liked to be independent like Bangalore or Chennai or Kolkata, but because it's a union territory and there is a mismatch and there's an overlap of functions with the union government, I really have my sympathies with Delhi, but it deserves to be independent according to me, like other cities. And now the one question that was not answered, the door-to-door solid waste collection question by the student. See, I don't know where you live, but there is a substantial difference in services across the core urban and the peri-urban areas of the city. So it depends on where you live. And I mean, empirical evidence, theory, and actually the practical evidence shows that the services are best in the core of the city, but they deteriorate as you move to the periphery of the city. So it all depends on where you live and which ward. Maybe you're at the border of two different wards, where one ward is within the core and another is within the periphery of the city. And I also liked the solution provided by one of the gentlemen that there should be a vision document for the city by the citizens. This was one of the conditions of the JNNURM. That city should have a master plan and all projects that they have should fall within the overall vision that the city has for itself. And I think this is best done by citizens. This is an excellent suggestion, which I think should be tabled at much broader forum. Apart from that, I think this session was really very, very stimulating, and I really appreciate all the distinguished panelists for your excellent views. And I agree with Ashwin that, I mean, this is my own experience, Ashwin, that whenever you have a technical solution, I have become mature enough not to really raise this technical solution at all, because people are aware that this is indeed the solution, but the decision is political. I completely agree with you, Dr. Ashwin, and I'm very thankful to you for bringing this across to this forum. And the other end of the spectrum was Dr. Brinda's point that we can try to make this all this technical and planning oriented, right? I really appreciate your suggestion also for structured processes which can act as a bridge between the citizen and the government, taking into account all these planning considerations. And Mathew, I enjoyed your a discussion of the limitations of the Constitutional Amendment Act. For example, this is something that I never noticed. The transport is not there as a function, and there is no local list, right? So this is really a good point. And Professor Anil, yours was also very, very distinguished in the sense that you said that the discourse has been concentrated only on the metropolitan cities and not really below that. I really enjoyed this. So I should not really make any attempt to summarize this, but I think that there are many suggestions in this panel discussion, both from the audience, the panelists, for the government, which fortunately or unfortunately they have missed. But I hope that there is some media coverage of this. But I also hope that Katyayani and Sandeep and someone from INHAF can make note of these suggestions to pass this on to the government. I would like to thank the organizers again, INHAF, Civic and Citizens Agenda for Bengaluru, for inviting all of us in this interesting panel discussion. And I would like to bring this to a close now. And we do apologize for any inconvenience due to the delay caused on our side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalla, and all the panelists. I apologize, I forgot to introduce